After days of uncertainty, doctors say US President Donald Trump no longer has any COVID-19 symptoms. Trump returned to the White House earlier in the week after hospital treatment, saying he felt good and that fellow Americans should not let COVID-19 dominate their lives. With the presidential election just weeks away, Trump is presenting himself as a corona superhero and sometimes appearing to show contempt for the more than 200,000 Americans who've lost their lives in the pandemic. So on To The Point, we ask Trump's mysterious recovery. Will COVID decide the US election? Well, thanks so much for joining us here on the show, where my guests are Fischer, who argues that Trump prefers the simplistic to the scientific, but that means nothing to the virus. Also with us is Tausendfreund from the German Marshall Fund, who says Trump's strange corona show, as she puts it, hurts more than it helps, but it is still a very tight race. And a warm welcome to William Glucroft, US native and DW News reporter. He believes that Trump's critics would be wise to temper their schadenfreude. Nothing has taken the president down yet. Interesting statements. Thank you all three for being here. Lovely. Tausendfreund, first question or first impression. You talk about Trump's strange corona show. What is your response, your personal response to that show, to that presentation that we've seen?
Yeah, I mean, it's a insane sort of movie type of inszenierung in the middle of a real pandemic. And as you said in the beginning, I mean, 200,000 people have died, and then he, creates this crazy film that's like an advertisement.
It's like the theatre of the absurd.
It is very much like the theatre of the absurd, with the background of a very, very serious illness and a country that has not managed to handle it correctly.
OK, we agree that it's a theatre of the absurd kind of a performance, William. What is he trying to achieve, Donald Trump, with it?
I mean, that he's a Superman, that he's able to dominate this virus, that this virus is not a very big deal, just like he's always been saying all along. And it should be very importantly noted that this virus might not be such a big deal if everyone in America was able to get the kind of health care and the kind of access to medicines that he's been able to get. But the coronavirus is costing average Americans, depending on their health insurance plan, up to $70,000 in most severe cases. This is something that President Trump doesn't have to deal with, nor does anyone in government, because they get government health care.
And the whole show that he's putting on at the moment, is it driven by gut instinct, or is there a strategy behind it?
I mean, maybe those two things are the same thing, his gut and strategy. I mean, he is a showman. We know this from his years at The Apprentice and Miss Universe. He really thrives in this kind of showmanship-like atmosphere. We're testing the limits now of how much he can bend reality. The White House, the Trump White House, has been very much a boy who cries wolf kind of situation. And even if they are telling you the truth now, even if Trump really is better, we just don't know. There's absolutely no reason for us to believe what he's telling us, and that's extremely damaging for both his supporters and his opponents to know what's really going on.
Yeah, do we know, don't we know, Julia? I mean, you're a doctor and a journalist all in one. When with your doctor's eye, what are you seeing? What bill of health would you give Donald Trump at the moment?
Yeah, even as a doctor, it's hard to tell if you're not there. Because, I mean, he did get medications that's actually reserved for severe cases. And if he wasn't severely sick, then why did he get them? Maybe because he said, just give me everything that you have. I want it all. And that is quite realistic. It's difficult to say. Also, we don't see him all the time. He might be resting in bed and later coming out pretending to be the superhero. We just don't really know.
But what is your guess? Is he going to be able to fight the campaign to the end? I mean, he's got weeks ahead. It's going to be tough.
It's going to be tough, but it totally depends on how he recovers now. If he really is fine and if he does get a negative test, because that is something that I, as a doctor, find very difficult to see how right now, being infective, he runs around without a mask. And I mean, he does need to get a negative test before he can go back into debates and things. So I think that should really happen before he gets back to business as usual. Maybe he gets it done.
Rachel?
Yeah, I think we don't know yet. I mean, we'll know in the next week probably if he is in fact more seriously ill than he's letting on. He's going to hit a wall, and for example, the debate. Right? There's no way he can, first of all, get a negative test. Second of all, stand up there for 90 minutes if he's not actually fit. If the debate happens and if he actually shows up, then I think we know, okay, he really did recover quickly. But again, he recovered, maybe also quickly because he had every medicine, even experimental medicines that others can't get, and he was lucky.
OK, well, Donald Trump certainly appeared to be pumped up when he returned to the White House. Let's listen to a little bit of what he had to say.
Don't let it dominate. Don't let it take over your lives. Don't let that happen. We have the greatest country in the world. We're going back to work. We're going to be out front. As your leader, I had to do that. I knew there's danger to it, but I had to do it. I stood out front. I led.
Rachel Tausendfreund, the president said, don't let COVID dominate, don't let it take over your lives. Are Americans likely to be inspired by that message or comforted, or what?
Definitely not comforted. Some very few might be inspired by that message, but let's look at Michigan for a second. This was a state I'm from Michigan, and this is a state that Donald Trump crucially won in the election after it having gone to Democrats in the previous 3 elections.
Yeah.
And Michigan was the 3rd worst hit state in the beginning of the corona crisis. So when I talk to people who live, in the suburbs of Detroit or around, they need 2 hands to count the people they know who were very seriously ill, some of whom died. So this show is not working with them. It's not going to work.
Well, of course, we have to remember that even if polls are showing both nationwide and in crucial swing states that a majority, 2/3, whatever the number might be finding this completely unrealistic and not buying what Trump is saying. Trump doesn't necessarily need that many votes, as we saw in 2016. He doesn't even need the popular vote to be able to win. And that's the big question is, yes, the tide is against Donald Trump. Yes, the numbers are in favor of Joe Biden. Are they enough? Democrats have been saying since the convention, actually since Kamala Harris made her first speech as the vice presidential pick, that Democrats need voters to come out in droves. It's not enough just to have a win. They need a landslide victory, not only because of how the math works with the Electoral College, but just to make a definitive statement to Trump and all of his supporters. No, the reality is on our side. It's not going to be enough for there just to be a technical win. That Biden and the Democrats need a real hard win, maybe akin to what we saw with Reagan in his re-election in the 80s.
And I in one of the statements that I made earlier in the show, I indicated that perhaps there's a sense of, among many Americans, that they feel that there's a contempt for their lives and their struggles from the president. Is that going to help to create a mood that will push the Democrats to the size of voting that you say they need?
I mean, that's certainly what Democrats are hoping for. They immediately made this not about Donald Trump. They made this about health care. They made this about health care access. They made this about the seriousness of the virus, and that if Donald Trump, the most looked-after man in the world, can get coronavirus, then anyone can. That is still very serious. Really trying to use Donald Trump to their advantage to make their very point. The question is, the United States is very much an aspirational country. That's America's mojo, is its aspirational aspects, that anything is possible, regardless of the facts. You can go bankrupt 1,000 times, as we've seen Donald Trump do. It doesn't matter. The man is still president. The man he put his mind to it, and he became president. There's nothing more American than that idea. And the question is, are voters going to look at the reality and look at these 210,000 deaths and all of the other messes that the United States is in, social unrest, cities on fire, forests on fire, massive hurricanes, the economic crisis? Are they going to look at all those things, or are they going to listen to Donald Trump and listen to this in his kind of reverse optimism, the best is yet to come, stick with us, anything is possible, and try to dream big? Which of those Americas are voters going to see, or enough voters, as I just said, enough voters going to see to tip the election one way or the other?
Julia, your thoughts on that?
I think, what Trump has always been doing and what he's still trying to do is he really emotionalizes everything he says, and he really makes 2 groups of the people. It's the ones that are with him and his components, and he he really gets this group dynamic going, and he emotionalizes what he says, and is all about, we can do this together, and those are the bad guys, we have to fight together. And I think that is something that's emotionally working with the people. Unfortunately, he plays with the emotions the people have, with their fear, and with an attempt to find somebody they can blame in order to know how to act in that situation. And I think that is working for him.
And politics are human, and humans are emotional, so this works.
Well, in what almost appears to be a self-destructive mode, President Trump has sparked further controversy by blocking talks with the Democrats on a coronavirus stimulus package that could have eased the misery for many Americans, the kind of misery that his whole approach to the pandemic has brought with it.
So far, Trump's response to the corona pandemic has left more than 7 million people infected and over 200,000 dead in the U.S. At the start of the epidemic, this is what he said.
Looks like by April, you know, in theory, when it gets a little warmer, it miraculously goes away. I hope that's true.
Instead of listening to experts, he suggests bizarre forms of treatment.
Supposing we hit the body with a tremendous, whether it's ultraviolet or just very powerful light. Then I said, supposing you brought the light inside the body, which you can do, either through the skin or in some other way, right? And then I see the disinfectant, where it knocks it out in a minute.
He refused to wear a mask during his campaign appearances. And at the televised debate in September, he mocked his challenger, Joe Biden, for doing so.
I don't wear masks like him. Every time you see him, he's got a mask. He could be speaking 200 feet away from it. He shows up with the biggest mask I've ever seen.
Biden the coward versus Trump the Superman. Will this strategy work?
That's the question. Trump the Superman, Biden the coward. Is it going to work, the strategy?
No. I think he was maybe on track to have a little bit of success with that, and then he got infected himself. I mean, it's really the game changer in the Trump narrative thus far. I mean, he has to do now this...
Because he isn't invulnerable.
He is.
We have learned that, we have discovered that, we now know it apparently for a fact.
Yeah, and Joe Biden's not a coward. Joe Biden is maybe smart because he's not the one who's infected. I mean, you know, not to be crude, but the attack is so clear. If the president cannot even protect himself, how is he supposed to protect the people?
Julia, how do you? It might be instructive to compare Donald Trump with his contempt. Again, I'm going to use that word for doctors, for experts, for specialists, and somebody like Angela Merkel, who is herself a scientist. You know, this you described it as systematic science against superstition, almost. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what he's doing is it's so difficult to watch how his scientific advisors tell him one thing and he does another. He politicizes the measures against the coronavirus in a wrong way and gets the people not to wear the mask to make sure they are the real Trump followers. That's really dangerous and reckless, and yeah. I don't see how people who also have a scientific belief cannot see that. It's difficult to watch.
Well, Joe Biden, for his part, has made it clear that he wants corona to dominate the election. Here's what he had to say on that front.
And here's what I'll do as president. Number one, call on every single American to wear a mask when they're around other people outside their households. Wear a mask when you're on public transportation. If I can say something here, this is not about freedom. It's about patriotism.
Is Joe Biden going to succeed in maintaining the corona story as the central narrative of this election battle?
I mean, we've had so many huge, earth-shattering issues in this election year, starting with Trump's impeachment, then the pandemic, the economic fallout, the social injustice, all the natural disasters. Trump's taxes have finally come to light, or at least part of them. The debate debacle. Any one of these things would upend an election and change the result. We're dealing with all of these things at once. It seems difficult to imagine how coronavirus won't be the big topic through the election, but who knows what these next 2 or 3 weeks are going to bring. You know, time goes fast, but in election season...
You yourself have pointed out he's still, you know, in a boxing metaphor, he's still on his feet, he's still fighting. How does he manage that?
Because he's Donald Trump, and he has, you know, he was once interviewed. He was once interviewed by a photographer for PBS, and he was asked, you know, how do you manage, you know, this storm around you? And Donald Trump said, "I am the storm." He really relishes in this chaos. He likes creating chaos and controlling that chaos. And, you know, you might think his policies and his being president is despicable, but from that point of view, he's very effective.
Let me just stick with you for a second, because I know that you have said that it's not just the president who is ill, but the presidency that is ill, that is sick.
That's right.
Yeah.
You know, Donald Trump wants to make everything about himself, always. And for liberals or his opponents, people around the world, people here in Europe, who are laughing right now or saying, "I told you so," or maybe even rejoicing in the fact that Donald Trump got coronavirus after denying it for so long or playing it down for so long, that's playing into his hands about making it all about Trump. When a president is sick, the presidency is sick. The presidency is limited to what it can do. The president is just the individual filling that role. It's, of course, a much broader office of advisors and executive branch, and we see now that high-level military officials are in quarantine. It takes its toll on a country. And if you do care about what we call the liberal world order, the post-war order, if we care about, you know, a strong, stable United States working with Europe, then you need you want a strong, stable president and a presidency. So we've seen this in the past, you know, with Woodrow Wilson, with FDR. You know, major events happen. They're sick. They haven't really informed their advisors or the people who might take over for them. And we've just gotten lucky in these instances that there have been strong, competent people around a weak or sick president to take over for things. We might not always have that. You know, luck in history has been on America's side for a long time. We don't know how long that's going to last for.
And pursuing this thought still further, Rachel, first of all, we began with perhaps the president himself is ill or sick. Perhaps the presidency is ill or sick. A prestigious German newspaper wrote a couple of days ago, America is sick.
Yeah, I mean, of course, literally, first of all, America is sick. The numbers are bad and getting worse. And the fact that it hasn't been able to deal more effectively, you know, like Germany, for example, this is not a sign of a healthy country. The fact that, you know, someone like Donald Trump, first of all, is president, and second of all, that we cannot believe, that we would be wrong to uncritically believe the information coming out of the White House. This is a sign of sickness. We should be able to believe the information coming out of the White House, but sadly, we cannot.
Can America be a resurgent society, a resurgent country, politically, medically, in terms of the health of its people? Can it shrug all this off?
I think there's a lot of work to do. It's going to be a tough time, and there's a lot of things that have to happen concerning the pandemic right now, but also concerning the health system, having also also poor workers getting in health insurance and things like that. So there's really, and economically there has a lot to be done. So it's a long way. There's a lot of work to do.
We've seen in the vice presidential debate taking place in Utah, Mike Pence on the one hand. Let's listen to what he had to say first, and then we'll see what the challenger had to say.
From the very first day, President Donald Trump has put the health of America first. Before, there were more than 5 cases in the United States, all people who had returned from China. President Donald Trump did what no other American president had ever done. And that was he suspended all travel from China, the second largest economy in the world.
What do you make, Julia, of that defense of President Trump and his strategy?
It's a nice try, but there were so many other things that went wrong, and the people who actually brought the virus into the country did not come from China, but from Europe, and they did also come from Europe, and he didn't stop that on time. And he keeps downplaying how dangerous the virus is. He did that in the start, which is why he didn't lock down the country early enough. When he chose to lock down, he didn't use the time to prepare the country for the reopening. He reopened too early. And that's why he's still running after the pandemic, and he keeps politicizing the measures against the coronavirus, and that's just terribly dangerous.
OK. Well, Mike Pence was up against Kamala Harris, California Senator. Let's listen to what she had to say.
The American people have witnessed what is the greatest failure of any presidential administration in the history of our country. And here are the facts. 210,000 dead people in our country in just the last several months. Over 7 million people who have contracted this disease. 1 in 5 businesses closed. We're looking at frontline workers who have been treated like sacrificial workers.
Rachel, like myself, you set your alarm clock to be up early in the morning to watch the debate. What did you make of that and the debate in general?
I mean, the debate in general was a bit like traveling in time back to 2015. You know, it was a return to sort of standard American political debates, which are also not great, right? There's a lot of sort of running around the truth, not answering questions, you know, brutal attacks that sort of stay on the surface. So this was, you know, by no means some kind of shining example of democracy, but wow, was it refreshing after the presidential debate. I think they both gave pretty good performances, did quite well. And what we see, you know, among other things, is Pence is so much better at defending Trump and defending Trump's policies than Trump himself is.
Well, we should be careful not to trip over the bar that we've set so low for ourselves. You know, Pence himself has described himself as Rush Limbaugh on decaf when he was a far-right conservative radio show host. So he has that calm,
It's a fact that is often forgotten about Pence.
Right, Kamala Harris was the Attorney General, and Mike Pence was a conservative radio show, talk show host, and not even in a very huge, not even the biggest of markets. So we should definitely, as you say, debates in general in the United States are not really a model, and we should be mindful of where we keep our bar. I think when it comes to the Trump administration, these claims about, you know, battling the virus and taking it seriously, on a number of fronts, the Trump administration, I think, intentionally confuses instincts with outcomes. A lot of their instincts are correct. You know, needing to be tougher on China, needing to get, you know, NATO to, you know, shape up and be more of an equal partner with the United States, and general relations with the United States and other parts of the world, trying to bring back manufacturing in a lot of these working-class, blue-collar towns that have just been decimated over the last several decades. The instincts are right. That doesn't necessarily mean the outcomes and the way they choose to pursue those policies are very good. As we saw with the trade war, it's American consumers and American companies that are paying these tariffs, for example. And they'll talk about their instincts, but it's their outcomes. As you rightly pointed out, yeah, okay, you blocked travel from China. What about all the other things you didn't do or denied?
OK, the Biden bandwagon is racing apace forward to victory. It appears, you could almost say at this point in time, what could upset the bandwagon?
Himself, as we've seen. Joe Biden can often be his own worst enemy. He's benefited from the coronavirus by having fewer opportunities to put his foot in his mouth.
If something really big happens that takes all of our attention away from the coronavirus again, that's probably good for Trump. I mean, I hope that's going to have to be big and bad, so I hope nothing like that happens. But that would certainly upend things.
Yeah, I also think only if you get that attention away from the coronavirus and maybe back to economics or something, that could help. But I don't really see that coming.
Unless the long wished-upon vaccine comes out, which might magically appear as Trump keeps pressuring the FDA and the CDC to do.
Who's going to be the next president of the United States of America?
I
mean, that's such a simplistic question, but I'd like to see
We thought it was simple before 2016.
Your reasoning behind the decision or the guess you're going to give me.
Yeah. So, you know, we all know now that guessing is very dangerous. The numbers look very good for Biden. The storyline that I think is going to continue until Election Day, which is COVID and the circle around Trump potentially getting sicker and sicker, is not good for Trump. Therefore, I do think it's Biden's race to lose at this point.
Julia.
I also think so, because Trump has been trying to push away the coronavirus as long as he could, whenever he could, and right now he can't anymore, and that's his biggest problem, and I think that's going to be the weakness that will cost him the win.
There's definitely no way I'm going to be put down on record for saying one way or the other. I think what you said was very much right on. There are 2 points to make. We probably, most likely, will not have a result on election night. And Trump is probably going to do everything in his power to sow doubt into the results. So even if Biden looks like he's winning and factually is winning, there might still be a lot of doubt swirling around in the days and weeks to follow. And I think the bigger point is to remember, you mentioned earlier how America is sick. I think it's important to remember that Trump, to continue with this metaphor, is a symptom, not a cause. That you know, when the president is your guy, you're very happy that he has all the power. And when he's not your guy, you want that power taken away. And Donald Trump really has ripped off the Band-Aid, and underneath is a lot of problems that have been festering in the United States for a very long time that only now happen to be affecting or being felt by a majority of Americans, that have been felt by other groups of Americans for a very, very long time. I think those are bigger issues that the United States has to deal with.
He wallows in disruption. He's a master of disruption. Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah.
I think it's been...
No,
I think it's been one of the constant themes of the recent years under Trump, and I think it could be what we're going to be looking at in the next. Is he? We're going to have to leave it there. We've been talking about the U.S. election, about Trump, about the pandemic, and how it's having an impact, and whether it will continue to have an impact. Thanks for joining us. If you've enjoyed the show as much as I have, come back next week. Tschüss.